we feeling? Good?
Feeling good.
Ready to get started?
Ready to get started.
All right. Oh, wait, no. I got to restart that intro now. Fuck. All right.
Dang.
What's that?
Dang.
I know. I fucked up my own intro for the first time in 28 episodes.
Really?
Unbelievable, man. All right. How you doing? I'm here today with the man himself, Joe Bocca.
That's me. Last I checked. What's up, Johnny?
Nothing much. So please explain to my viewers exactly what it is that you do with your channel.
Well, my channel, I'm on a bit of somewhat of a hiatus right now, but I've done some interviews, mostly Catholic content, historians, philosophers, things of this sort. I've made a few appearances on my buddy's podcast, Rules for Retrogrades, Tim Gordon. So if you Google me, Joe Bocca, you'll see my name pop up on his videos. Again, mostly Catholic content, some cultural
stuff.
stuff.
That's Bocca with 2 C's, right?
2 C's. So yeah, mostly Catholic conservative content. I do a bit of writing over at a blog called 1 Peter 5. So again, that's 1 Peter 5. Google it. And I write for them. I write articles on occasion about, again, cultural stuff, Catholic stuff, pro-life things. So all kinds of shit.
All right. Yeah, I like it, man. And so first thing I wanted to start off with was I saw this interesting story post that you had the other day about
yes.
About capitalism and its downfalls, I guess. Would you mind going in depth?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't studied economics as much as maybe I should. I was a history major in college. So the philosophy and the finer details of economics it's not all at the front of my mind, but I could give you probably a bit of a synopsis. So if you're familiar with, we all know who Karl Marx is, the father of communism.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. So first and foremost, Marx would have viewed capitalism and the free market as a necessary step towards a communist state, a Marxist takeover. So actually, the free market and capitalism, as it were, it's integral to the coming of the Marxist ideal state. So really, if you view it from that lens, it's in a sense part of the problem. And we know capitalism started with Adam Smith. So he was he wrote the first book on it, and talking about the hidden hand and all that stuff. So it comes from an Enlightenment tradition. So the time in the 1700s and the 1600s of Hume, Locke, these guys who were all what you call empiricists. So an empiricist derives they understand reality from based entirely on experience. So they don't think of what we'd call the metaphysical or unseen realities. So they just base everything on
the here and now.
Correct, material. So it was an economic philosophy that did not take religion into account. So a religious critique of it and a practical critique of it would be, well, you'd start asking questions about human nature. And so you think of the free market, you think of the hidden hand, things like this, the hidden hand that guides the economy. Well, you have to ask who the actors are in the economy, people, and whether or not people are inherently good or inherently bad. So in our case, as I said, I do a lot of Catholic content. We would be thinking of people as having an inclination towards sin and an inclination towards evil. Thus, when you have capitalism, it often degenerates into crony capitalism, and kind of what you see now, where you see all these corporations, Disney's in the news these days, right?
For all the wrong reasons.
Right. So yeah, exactly, for all the wrong reasons. But so you see Disney with their grooming situation and all this horrible, degenerate, satanic stuff.
Yeah.
And one could see this as a logical extension of what happens in a capitalist system. So so what you see now is, in many respects, the corporations becoming like an arm of the government, and so as to be indistinguishable from the government. And it's kind of like and it's Marxist in a sense, because the corporations are basically indistinguishable from the state, and they start to collectivize and become these giant mega corporations at the expense of smaller businesses, mom and pop shops, things of this sort, so as to kind of crush those underfoot. And you could be reminded of how back in the Soviet Union, the USSR took all of the farms, took all of the means of production from the commoner.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, the two can't be separated.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So from there are some. Now I haven't done too much research on these. There are two competing schools that aren't socialism. So if anybody's panicking, I'm not a socialist. There's one that's called distributism, and one is called corporatism. The distributism angle of it is mostly agrarian and geared towards a more farm economy, things like that. The old distributist saying is 3 acres and a cow for everybody. And corporatism is more like a guild type of economy. Again, I haven't really done my homework on the two, but they're just some alternatives that one might consider before saying that they're kind of sold on capitalism, because in many respects, it is this neoliberalism of Reagan and things of that sort is part of the problem more than it's part of the solution.
I could see that. And I understand exactly what you're saying in terms of how, I guess, the downfalls of communism or downfalls of capitalism, being that, the state can have major influence on these major corporations and especially like their own politics will obviously leach into how they market products. Like, as you could see, like now with Disney, you brought up some very good examples, but I do think that it is the most valid system that we've had so far. And I don't see many other solutions right now. I'm looking at, the world economies in general. And it seems that free market societies seems to flourish the most. And it seems that small businesses specifically seem to flourish most in those countries as well.
Well, I mean, in many respects, they had. So
What changed in your eye?
Well, I mean, it's one of these things. I had done another podcast with a friend of mine, Jeremiah Bannister, and we were talking about. I was actually trying to trace the historical degeneration, kind of what we see in the church and things of this sort. And once you start tracing crises and where things started to go wrong, it's actually a seemingly endless chain. It's like, well, did it go wrong here? Did it go wrong there? Did it go wrong here? Did it go wrong there?
There's no one thing.
Correct. Where I think it came out, a lot of it anyway, where things really seem to become obvious after COVID. You started to see all you'd have to do is, we're in New York, all you'd have to do is drive through the city, see how many, coffee shops and delis and all this kind of thing closed.
Yep.
But you don't see Chase Bank closing down or Capital One closing down or Duane Reade or CVS or anything like that.
True.
So I think you started to see the degeneration of the capitalist system, which I would argue is a result of capitalism, it's not an accident. So
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things. Look,
I think it was just a matter of being unchecked, though. You know what I mean?
Well, then there's the question, right? Checked by what?
Checked by the terrible people in power.
Yeah. So that's the unfortunate thing is, okay. So you say, and I would agree, we don't really have a good solution at the moment. We really don't. So so when you start talking about economic theory and government theory and political philosophy, you start to get yourself into a situation where it's like, okay, you start dealing with ideals instead of reality. So, okay, capitalism, no good is basically what I'm saying. But, okay, it needs to be checked. Checked by who? Checked by the people in power, the government? Well, this government? Well, certainly not this government.
But it obviously really should be the people.
Yeah, I mean, there's a respect in which the power has to, in some respect, be checked by people. First and foremost, everything has to be checked by God.
Absolutely.
And
that's where it gets tough with people, especially because,
yeah, it does.
Nowadays, we're obviously getting further and further away from those specific Judeo-Christian, those moral values that this country was essentially founded on.
Right. So, and then Now, there's an interesting thing. If you wanted to get into it, we could. The American Revolution being what it is.
In terms of what?
Well, whether, was America founded on Christian principles?
Well, what is your opinion on the case?
I mean, I think America has a lot of virtues. Americans are historically, typically, pretty salt of the earth, good people. But this is another one of those things where if you look at the Constitution and you look at the very early stages of the founding and Judeo-Christian, for instance, I usually just say Christian, but in many respects, all men are created equal by their creator, all this. In many respects, it's actually very much a non-religious and a non-Christian text. So it kind of defers to this idea of what we'd call a philosophical God, a God that exists but that doesn't engage, that is not interested in the affairs of humanity, right? So in that sense, the morality ends up being somewhat arbitrary, and you actually you see this kind of it's like, okay, all men are created equal, and when guys like Malcolm X and all that, and Stokely Carmichael, all these guys were like, well, y'all said all men were created equal, but what about us? I mean, it did expose a flaw in the system, and then you go back and you look at the Constitution. Before the Constitution, we had what was called the Articles of Confederation. Mm-hmm. So the Articles of Confederation held that the statute was that in order to pass a law, right, in order to pass anything through Congress or anything like that, well, not Congress necessarily, but it was more true to the vision of what the United States were. So literally it's in the name, United States. The emphasis was on, this is pre-constitutional America, the emphasis was on the states, the role of the states, what we'd call subsidiarity, power coming from the lowest, the most local source. So all of the states, as a matter of fact, well, all of the 13 states, the original 13, had to agree on something before it passed, before a law could even be taken into effect. Now, you could read into the Constitution what's called, and this is what Alexander Hamilton was on the side of what you'd call the Constitution having implied powers, so you could read something into the Constitution that's not actually there. You see this a lot. Versus Thomas Jefferson, who was more of a localist and wanted to take the Constitution as written, literal, not reading anything into the Constitution. Hamilton won out. So that's where you see something like Roe v. Wade, and you posted today on Instagram about the
Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado, correct. And I forgot which other state. I had posted about it the other day.
California, I think.
Yeah,
with,
where
infanticide.
Yeah, infanticide. They were pretty well known that they're selling fetal tissue all over the place. So
Normal behavior.
Well, yeah, and I think that's what's often, more often than not, incredible to me, even as I'm 30, and it still doesn't. I'm still shocked in many respects when I talk to conservatives, alleged conservatives, who are just. I mean, it's myself. I'm sure in many cases, but conservatives so often are go along to get along type people, and they don't want to speak clearly about what the hell kind of crisis we're in. We live in a country that where I read that on Instagram, I read your post on Instagram, or somebody else reads my post on Instagram or Twitter or something, and you see it happening, and you just go about your day as though we're not in some kind of crisis situation, when we most certainly are.
Well, tell me you don't understand that perspective, though. I mean, because I understand it very well, especially being, from the town that I was in. I mean, there were definitely some conservative people, but, like growing up in high school now, if you said, certain opinions, you would get absolutely berated.
Yeah, that's right.
As a kid, that's very hard to deal with, like now I don't have a problem as you can tell.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean it's a product in many respects of the public school system.
Which is absolutely terrible.
Horrible, and it always was, more or less. I mean, there were times where it was better, but I mean, we're seeing it at its absolute worst. But I saw a useful Venn diagram where
Oh boy.
yeah, where
You're gonna have to send me this.
yeah, I will. I certainly will. I'll probably post it to the gram when we're done. But the two circles where one said having to go to work, and the other circle said the end of the world or something like that.
Oh my
and then
gosh.
where they intersected was like, we're right here. We're right in the middle. So we're dealing with not necessarily that we're at the end of the world or anything like that, but
Yeah.
we're in this catastrophic situation where I was just complaining to my parents and to anybody who listened about how expensive it is to just exist.
For real.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the way that even our parents lived.
Yeah.
You want to hear something crazy?
Yeah.
You know how much my grandfather, and this is in 1954, paid for his first house?
I don't know if I want to know.
$5,000.
Gosh. Yeah.
$5,000 for what right now on Long Island probably costs about $500,000.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I was just looking at buying another vehicle because of how expensive gas is and just what I have to pay in rent out here. It's just so outrageous, and yet we're kind of stuck in this routine of where there's not much, where it feels like there's not much you could do when there's so many problems. That's why it's important for people like yourself to have a platform and do things of this sort. Talk where you could talk, write where you could
Yeah,
write.
but I mean, it's pretty clear from just the first conversation that we had now that I'm not even close to as intelligent as you. So I think it's pretty important.
I don't know about all that.
Well, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm trying to find a good defense for capitalism now, and there are some, especially in respect to small businesses and just general free market economy.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, if you wanted a good defense of capitalism, there's a guy who does some speaking and writing on it. His name's Dr. J. Richards. Very good. But yeah, it's just it's funny that was one of the posts that I knew would get a bit of heat. So I'm like, I'm going to do that. That
was good.
Thank you. But that and I actually that between that position and the fact I don't vote anymore.
why is that?
Well,
Because I personally think it's very important too,
yeah, and
especially on a local level.
a lot of people who agree with me on other things really would have my head for this. So they get very upset. But one of the reasons I mean, how do you feel about the goings on, for instance, in 2020?
I mean, I'm pretty disappointed, and I think that it was a matter of just the voting system, though, because, obviously YouTube might flag this, but let's just say that there was something awry in a
Right.
certain
well,
political
yeah.
affair.
Yeah, we could say it without saying it, right?
Yeah.
So
I believe that there is credible evidence as to the fact, and unfortunately it just sucks because I want to make videos about it because I have like what's it called? I go on the Arizona State Senate website where they used to have that information. I don't know if they have it anymore. I mean, the Wisconsin State legislature is like having hot debates right now about it, and all these numbers are coming out about apartment buildings with 102% voter turnout, towns with 100% of a certain political party, and
Right.
Things that are statistically impossible, anomalies.
draw your own conclusions, folks.
No, for real. Yeah. Because it's like, what are you supposed to say?
John has a very good channel, and I don't want to demolish it. But that, and I said to myself, I said, well, okay. I mean, if there's this kind of a capability, I did vote in that election, and I did say to myself that it was the last one that I'd voted.
Interesting.
Yeah, and since arriving there, I already. I mean, I just don't know, and I'm sure other people in local politics would agree with me, or whoever. I just don't know that merely voting Republican is going to get us out of the jam we're in.
It's not.
You know what I mean?
100%.
It's people need to change. You know, it's.
I agree with that.
If filling in a bubble ain't going to do it. You know.
I also think a big thing would be for people to start doing research into
Heaven forbid, yeah.
just not only into the politicians that they're supporting, but also just who supports the politicians that they're supporting.
Yes.
You know, like everyone on the conservative side right now is like, they're like sucking off Tulsi Gabbard on the daily.
Yes.
But she's.
I was going to bring her up, yeah.
But she's big fan of the World Economic Forum, apparently.
Yeah, she sure is. Well, I forgot who I was speaking with, but we were talking about this kind of what had been known a couple of years ago as the intellectual dark web and things like that. Peterson and these guys. I like Peterson, but
I do like Peterson.
Yeah,
as
Peterson's
well.
sharp, but
only for a psychology standpoint, though. I don't really know if I really support his governmental stances.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about his politics. I mean, he's Canadian, but his stuff on religion is interesting. He doesn't go as far as I'd like him to, but he's smart. But the reason I bring that up is he's kind of adjacent to these what people consider an alternative viewpoint, like Tulsi Gabbard, even a Dan Crenshaw, people who somebody who people get excited for whatever reason. People not so much Crenshaw anymore, thank God. But
that guy's a joke.
Oh gosh,
you remember that video of him with the 12-year-old girl? Don't ever question my faith.
Yeah. You just can't make it up. Faith in what?
Yet he calls Jesus a mythical character.
Yeah. Faith in what? I mean, the guy looks like he's never seen a war he hasn't wanted to start. But
Yikes.
Yeah. But
let's call a spade, I guess.
Yeah, and so Gabbard. And it's my understanding, somebody could fact check me on this, but that Crenshaw, Gabbard, people like this were tied to some Soros money.
Soros money, but specifically the World Economic Forum.
Right,
yeah.
Right, and
I guess you would consider that Soros money.
Yeah, basically. I mean, and with friends like that, who needs enemies?
Yeah.
But people are just so desperate and it's understandable. So you see a guy like Biden or whoever it is on TV, and the first inkling of somebody sounding remotely sane, people get excited for.
Yeah. But I don't even think he does.
Who's that?
Biden.
No, I mean Gabbard, and he doesn't sound remotely sane, and that's why people might get excited over it. Tulsi Gabbard is she sounds somewhat reasonable.
And she's from that side of the aisle.
Right. But it's like, oh, look, one of them likes us. You know what I mean? And I scratch my head and because it's much like Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah.
People love their captor so much.
It's true.
And I'm just like, these people hate you, bro. Like, stop.
Yeah. And I just personally, I don't see a solution to the system that we have now. I've always been a really big defender of the Republic and just, that idea of electing representatives. Mm-hmm. And I've also been, obviously, a big supporter, a staunch capitalist.
Right.
And now, as you've put forward, I'm starting to see, Kevin Lee?
Kevin Lee.
He's a fighter.
Yes.
His famous line is like, I always see holes in the game. I'm starting to see holes in the system.
Yeah. And, and I not to get too into the weeds or the nuances of it, but at bottom, and most of what I write and speak about is religion. Michael Knowles with the Daily Wire.
Yes.
Yeah, he's good.
I'm not a big fan of his though. And it's not his politics, because I don't really know his politics very well. It's just his personality. I'm sorry, Michael.
Hey,
you're just a little cringe, my man.
Somebody, not everybody's for everybody. But Michael Knowles is good for. See, I listen to his show sometimes. I listen to him and Matt Walsh on the Daily Wire. Walsh is funny.
I like Matt Walsh.
I don't particularly care for Ben Shapiro, but
yeah, me neither.
talk about somebody who hasn't seen a war he didn't want to start. Good heavens, jeez. But Michael Knowles is fond of quoting an old Cardinal Manning, So he said, at bottom, every human conflict is theological. It begins and ends with God and Christ. So,
and how do they figure that though? What is the rationale behind that?
So, you familiar? You've heard of Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher?
Yeah,
So-
I've heard, but I'm not familiar with his
So
work.
the philosopher Nietzsche would have said,
Is he the one who invented nihilism or the concept of nihilism?
he, in some respects, he was nihilistic. In others, he wasn't.
Is he the one who has the most famous writings on nihilism?
Right. Yeah, a lot of them, and he's the one with the profound mustache. But so he's look. I'm a staunch Roman Catholic, but I very much appreciated Nietzsche because of his. He predicted a lot of what we're going through, and so he is famous for pronouncing the death of God, right? He said, God is dead. God is dead, and we have killed him. That's what Nietzsche said. So,
And that was more of a figurative thing.
but what he meant is that societally, God is dead. So people, you or I or whoever, might say that God exists, right? But we don't carry on about our day, or whoever doesn't carry on about his day, as though there's a living God. And we could extrapolate this by looking at society, and we know that we could deduce that we live in a society that has forgotten God completely. And why does that matter? So Nietzsche said once after the death of God, the will to power will be all that's left. So that could be deduced or summarized by the idea that might makes right. So whoever the most powerful man is, and the most powerful group, which is kind of what we have now.
Yes.
The most powerful group, their will be done. Joe Biden's will, George Soros, the World Economic Forum, Davos, all these people, their will be done, as opposed to whose?
The will of the people and the will of God.
Correct. So, but and that's why. And to get back to the virtues in many respects, the virtues of America, Madison, I think it was Madison. It was either Madison or Adams, said that the American system will only work and only flourish with a religious people, because if you're taking into account the will of the people, and you have a godless people, you're going to get godless laws. So
I see.
And look where we are now. So
It does. Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
and so we the Catholic Church, the Orthodox, and I'm sure many Christians of all stripes would agree that there's this doctrine, this principle called the kingship, the social kingship of Christ, and beside from this just being some ethereal religious doctrine, it's just a path to sanity, because it's like, well, okay, you have two alternatives. You have the will to power. You have Nietzsche's will to power, it's God is dead, and therefore morality's dead, and everything is out the door with it. Because if there's no God, why is anything right or wrong?
That's true.
Objectively.
Yes.
So, but if your society and your government says no, rejects God, what exactly is there to check the power of the tyrant? Okay, so as far as we're concerned, Biden or whoever the big globalist person is, that there's a guy that has the most power. He's at the top in an earthly sense. If he's at the top and there's no one above him, morally and practically, who's stopping him from exercising his power?
And I was about to say, and also they dictate what the morals would be.
Yes.
I see what you're saying.
And if they could get, which they largely have, if they could get the religion beat out of people, and if they have enough weapons, which they do, I mean, they have the whole freaking army.
Well, and that's another thing though, is we'll get into that in a minute.
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, I could say in theory they have the whole army. I'm sure that is nothing against. I'm sure we have many a good soldier who wouldn't go along with that kind of thing, and praise God for them. But
you never know. Also, hey, everyone always brings up the example of 1930s Germany.
Yeah, it's a precarious situation. Yeah. I mean, it didn't take much to get there, to get to 1930s Germany.
It just took, hey, I'm just doing my job.
Just following orders and some propaganda.
Oh, well, it's funny now though, because I see a lot of movies about the time, and specifically one on Netflix, and I forgot the name of it, but it made it look like all of Germany was just so in favor of Hitler, but they really weren't.
No, they weren't. And
any historian worth their water would understand that Hitler was elected to power as chancellor and then wrote himself into the presidency.
Yes.
So
right.
Yeah, and people don't get it.
What there's a good quote, and I'll pull it up.
Do you have an idea of how Germany's parliamentary system worked back then? Was it like a multi, like how Canada and Britain, they have multiple parties rather than just the binary like we have? Was it something like that? Is it still something like that where there's like the Green Party, the this party, the Labour Party, the Tories?
Right after the Weimar Republic. I'm not as well up on it, on their system, so I don't want to pretend I am.
But let's hear that quote.
So the Irish poet William Butler Yeats is one of my favorites, but sums it up: the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. So you have, you have the worst people in Germany at the time, or the worst people in the Soviet Union at the time in 1917. They're the most passionate.
Am I one of the worst people? I'm pretty fucking passionate, man.
Well, and then the rest of the people do nothing, it's not that they're particularly bad.
Yeah.
It's just that they're going along to get along, and nobody, quite understandably, wants to do anything. It's tough to move because you look at a situation like the one we're in, or the Germans in 1930, and you can't automatically cast judgment on the everyday German because he's in many respects in the same situation as we are.
100%.
100%.
And you know what? It's funny. I actually really want to touch on this. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
I really want to touch on this because I think this is like vitally important.
Yeah.
And it's the whole idea that like men aren't men anymore.
Sure. Yeah.
But let's not. And it is true. I do think that we've definitely. Our testosterone scores have gone down quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that's documentable. But it's a matter of how in societies throughout history, the same type of thing has always happened. Mm-hmm. And it's not a matter of how masculine the men are. It's not a matter of how, unwilling people. It's a matter of how unwilling people are to live under a certain way. But human nature dictates the fact that we're here to just survive. And when things get hard, to essentially quit.
Yes. Yeah. You've heard the cliche, hard time.
Great times create weak men, and then weak men create hard times.
It obviously couldn't be more true. And you watch Jocko Willink a lot?
No, I don't. But I was the one that you sent or that you told me was the USS Liberty, right?
Correct. Yeah,
I didn't get through it yet.
It's a major red pill, but I recommend everybody listen to it. It's a great episode. But
no, I don't listen to Jocko very often.
But yeah, he's in my rotation. Jocko, this guy Daryl Cooper, Martyr Made. He's probably my favorite podcaster. But Jocko's main idea that he plays with, that he wrote the book Extreme Ownership on. He wrote this book, so is leadership, and the idea that nobody wants to be a man and take ownership, take responsibility for the things that are going on. And the other cliche is nature abhors a vacuum. People, that leadership vacuum will be filled, but what is it going to be filled by? It's going to be filled by people that don't have a goodwill, that aren't kind, that aren't good, but people that want to dominate.
And that's where we get Donald Trump.
Yeah, and that is where we get Trump.
Even though he's on our side, technically.
Yeah, I wonder about that.
What makes you wonder about that?
Well, I look at his presidency, and again, I voted for the man twice. I wouldn't again, but
I would still vote for him in 2024.
yeah. Look, if somebody wants to tell me that they would vote for him in 2025, I completely understand.
I mean, obviously, if there's a convincing enough case, then I would.
Sure. I mean, look, again, this non-voting position is just kind of a tack that I've taken, but I don't. It's not something people need to agree with me on, but
sure.
Yeah, but I see some things with Trump, and
what specifically?
Have you been publicly anti-vaccine on your show or no?
Oh no, yeah, I am.
Yeah. So
not anti-vaccine, but
COVID vaccine.
Yeah.
I mean, specifically the COVID vaccine. Yeah, I mean the other ones, whatever. But yeah.
At this point, I can't really say much.
Yeah,
about
we
that.
could have that's another story for another day. I'm not a scientist, But
no, you're not a biologist?
No. Yeah. Last I checked, I'm not. Yeah.
What's a woman?
Well, that too. But
sorry,
it's a birthing person.
Oh
right? Yeah. But I mean, Trump's a guy who's got to know what's going on. He's got to know what the elites are, what he's dealing with. And like, I look at him and I'm just like, dude, you got a booster shot? Like, are you really on my side? And I'm like, and I'm not judging people, but like, it's obviously a psyop at this point. Yeah, the proof is in the pudding. Then the fact that it's like, okay, the initial set of COVID lockdowns, which were particularly bad here in New York.
Oh, yeah.
Look, all right, people want to say, and to some extent it's true, that the people in power under him and the secret kings like Fauci and whomever else were the ones that put that into effect.
In a way.
And yet it still happened on his watch.
Well, so my argument would be for that in terms of the fact that, at the time, let's say Donald Trump didn't have the knowledge of the Wuhan lab and all this kind of stuff and actual data on the coronavirus itself. For a novel disease to come ripping through a society like China, mm-hmm. and then start spreading to all these different countries, and it's so noticeable, and it's it's something bigger than H1N1 and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
Obviously, you would feel that the gut reaction would be to do something like that. So in my opinion, that action is defensible in the short term.
Right. In the
for the 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Correct. But what we got was in many respects what we could call the COVID regime.
Absolutely.
I was just talking to a construction worker today, and he's just like, I don't take risks like I used to with my company, and the degree of uncertainty that came after COVID is just astronomical for people and detrimental. And right, okay, 2 weeks. Many of us didn't know what was going on, but how long was it necessary for it to carry on? For how complicit in it was he? Beside from the fact that I remember quite clearly that there were a lot of people early, like there was 2 doctors that put out a YouTube video, and the doctors that had to be silenced right away.
I remember.
Yeah.
I think I remember those guys. They were sitting in a boardroom, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah. And they had to be silenced right away. I remember a lot of citizen journalists going to hospitals, proving that these places weren't jam-packed with people.
Yep.
And yet we were acting, and he was acting as though it were this major, catastrophe, the likes of the Black Plague. Meanwhile, the only catastrophe was the fact that was self-inflicted, was foisted on us by the government. Meanwhile, we know that the psychological trauma and the drug use and the suicides and all that was the real consequences of the pandemic, not the pandemic itself.
No, it's true, honestly. And right now we have a really severe problem of people just being lost.
Yes.
And I think that's a really good door for bad actors, such as the liberals who are in power, and even some of the Republicans who are in power, to start you know that saying, when you give an inch, they take a mile.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
they're taking.
Yeah, they've got more than just one. I'd
Yeah,
say,
they're taking quite a few miles right now, and I feel like it's a lot easier when people are. They're just like, okay, I just want this whole thing to be over, and I'm so scared of this thing because the media's been shoving all this crazy shit down my throat for, what is it, 2 years now?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, over 2 years now.
Yeah. Oh, yep. We're past March, so we're over 2 years now. We're in April.
And right now we have a society that, even though they smoke less cigarettes than ever, probably drink more than ever,
Oh sure.
vape more than ever, smoke weed more than ever,
Yep.
do opiates.
Hard drugs,
Well,
yeah.
I can't say that honestly because I mean, Chinese opium back in the 1800s.
Well, yeah, that's another story. Yeah, yeah.
But
plenty of that going around,
but they didn't have the mainstream media back then.
no, they didn't, and it's somewhat, it's new for the West. This is
Uncharted territory.
yeah, in many respects, it's a different kind of evil and a different kind of catastrophe than we're used to dealing with. Something like the Civil War, for instance, very simple.
Yeah.
It's not that
Good and bad.
complicated. Yeah, no, good and bad, or well, I mean,
Perceived good and perceived bad.
right.
Depending on whose side.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's a lot. That's a whole another story. But
Yeah.
yeah,
As you can tell, I'm not
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
the most well versed
but,
in the Civil War.
yeah. It's interesting, but the lines are just so blurry, and what I find now versus what would have been centuries ago, or a century ago, 2 centuries ago, is that much of human suffering and human conflict and things like this sort has very much been moved to internal, psychological.
Yes.
So people throw around the term psyop, psychological operation,
Yes.
right? So the thing that is weaponized is fear,
Oh, yeah.
anxiety, things like that, and make people nervous.
And that's a crisis going on now. Is
Powerful.
And it's not hard to see why, but the amount of anxiety amongst, especially my generation and millennials, your
yeah.
generation,
Oh yeah, yeah. I did deal with
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's incredible. I speak myself as somebody who's dealt with it, but it's whereas again, when you look at the Civil War, I make an exception for the World Wars because they very much a modern thing, but the Civil War, the American Revolution, the hardships were, again, they were external, fighting,
Rationing.
simple,
Yeah.
very simple. We're in an age that's complicated and stressful, and you get browbeaten and gaslit into accepting these terrible things, or like the vaccine. It's like you said, and it's like we had this terrible situation with the lockdowns, and people were like, I just wanted to end. And I feel for somebody who was just like, I'll just get the shot and it'll be over, right?
Yeah.
I could go do whatever it is I'm doing or was going to do. Only for it to be like, well, it's like, guys, come on, like, you have to know after this that, like, this is not like
Literally.
this is not, it's not going to just be that easy. And now we have people scheduling their 5th.
Israel is on their 5th.
Yeah,
And we're now,
yeah.
now our senior citizens are on their 4th.
Right. That's right.
You know what's so fucking stupid, man, is just the fact that, I have a family member, and I'm not going to name names, but they're throwing a party in May, and anyone who's not vaccinated has to get tested.
Oh gosh.
Because there's going to be unvaccinated children.
Oh, okay. I see.
I mean, and they're like, well, we're just following CDC guidelines. No, you're not. You're
No, not at this point. Yeah.
You're literally not.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because it's always like, follow the science.
And yeah, that was the irony, is even during the heart of everything, I just remember being like, talking to my whomever, my friends or whatever. I just remember being like, you could prove this stuff with mainstream data.
Yeah.
Like
Same thing with the masks.
Yes. I'm like, this is all demonstrably true. But it's like they need your consent to do it. It's it's so important that they will tell you in many respects what they're doing, that they're deceiving you. You need to let them deceive you in order for this stuff to work.
Yeah.
Don't be deceived. That's a choice.
Yep.
That's a choice.
Absolutely.
So you have power as a person. You have power as an individual. You have freedom, free will. You could, so if Biden wants to go on TV or whomever wants to go on TV and say something stupid and, don't get concerned like all this is the end of the world, because it's not. You're a free agent. You could do it. You wake up in the morning and you could come here. You could, go lift weights or something, or read a book, and you could become better. You don't have to accept that.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? And people really put such a finality on life. I used to do the same thing. Like, the fact that people perceive that there's no afterlife.
Right.
And yeah, I get it. Death is final, but only for this stage. And if you had been raised, with the religious values that, let's say I was raised with, then you would understand that, and these things wouldn't be so concerning. But
yeah, and God's real, folks.
And it is concerning.
Yeah,
and specifically what you were talking about with how like Nietzsche.
correct. Right.
Because you're right. Like when the society and Madison, when the society is godless laws come into effect.
Yes, and not only that, people think. Well, I don't even know if people think this, because
people don't think.
Yeah,
man.
I don't. Godless.
No one thinks.
Well, yeah, that's another problem. Godless laws, and then we just talked about anxiety. Much of that is just despair. It's just a problem of despair.
Oh, yeah.
Sad people who are living, unfortunately, as though their life is without meaning, because that's the philosophy we bathed in growing up, and it's not true. Like it's actually, and people who want to call religion escapism or anything like this a fantasy, it's far from it. It's a grim reality. It's you wake up and it's not that your life is meaningless. Every second,
it's very meaningful.
It's very meaningful. It's deadly meaningful. It's to the, but in that, it's what gives life beauty. It's because if you say to yourself, well, okay, my decision to love my neighbor or be kind to my neighbor, if there's nothing to solidarity with your fellow man, why the hell be nice to anybody?
Exactly.
If there's no charity, if you're not made in the image of God, and Joe's not made in the image of God, and I'm not made in the image of God, there's no need. The logical extension of that philosophy, the logical thing to do, if your neighbor is not made in the image and likeness of God, the logical thing to do would be to dominate that person, or to get whatever good you can out of that person, and to take advantage of that person, because there's no morality. And that is in many respects what we grew up dealing with, or the ideas that were baked into our head, and it's just not true.
And it's not even by our families, honestly.
No, it never often isn't. My
the state, baby.
Yeah. Yes, and the schools are largely.
Oh yeah.
Responsible for that.
I mean, I remember in 2016. 2016 was my junior year of high school,
wow.
and I
was
was
in college. Yeah.
Oh man, that was probably the year of my political awakening, because 2015 was really, because 2015, 2014 and before that, I was kind of just like an edgelord, just saying stupid shit because my friends would say it. But then 2015 came along, and I started to actually think about politics.
Right.
So I became like a Bernie bro.
and like understandable. Yeah.
But you got to understand, and you're right, because the school would, the teachers especially, it's not even just the school and its curriculum, it's the teachers themselves. I remember talking with one of my history teachers, and history was one of, funny enough, because I forget all of it now, but history was one of my favorite subjects in high school and middle school. And one of my history teachers, and specifically in junior year, when I started to really start to lean more conservative, we were talking about Bernie and communism and democratic socialism.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And the teacher was just like, yeah, fuck yeah, that's the shit, you know, like essentially. And just like every single conversation we would have would be confirmed by positions of authority and people who are supposed to be educating you.
Yeah.
So, and it's very hard to have a dissenting point of view.
Yeah,
I mean, I almost got the shit beaten out of me by this one girl. For no, it wasn't me. One of my classmates almost got the shit beaten out of him by this one girl because he was talking about homosexual rights in Jamaica.
Oh, yeah.
And this girl was Jamaican, obviously.
Right.
So she got fucking pissed.
Right.
But she literally was like threatening him that she would like see him outside the classroom.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. And it's like, if you can't take objective realities, then how are we supposed to?
And she was against rights or whatever it is they
no,
were.
No,
she
was just saying that it was racist that he was calling out Jamaica as the government of Jamaica for having anti-homosexual laws.
Oh, dang. Okay. Yeah.
And it's like we've gotten so tribal to the point.
Just for even saying Jamaica.
No.
Yeah.
just for speaking a negative thing about Jamaica. Mm-hmm. But like that's common for everyone now.
Right. Is
just getting tribal about anything.
Well, because you're not a Jamaican means you can't talk about Jamaica, cultural appropriation.
Just because because you're not trans doesn't means you can't talk about trans rights.
Yeah.
It's in every single facet of identity
like trans
politics.
Is a thing, right? Yeah. Ladies and
gender dysphoria, baby.
Gosh. I mean, again, this is one of these things that we treat as normal.
Yeah.
That
and instead of helping these people.
Yeah. Yeah, these are confused, sad people. And
generally, yeah.
Yeah, and I was
with a 41% suicide rate.
I was thinking
pre and post op.
Yep, and I was listening to Biden talk about how we have your back, this and that, and I'm just like.
Did you see Eric Adams?
Yes, I did.
With the billboards.
My poor city. Yeah.
He's putting up billboards in Florida.
Yeah.
To encourage LGBT folks to move to New York City, so they can educate their kids.
Someone just sent it to me today.
But I mean, what does that even mean, though? The kids are still getting an education. They're just not being educated on sexuality and orientation. Indoctrinated on. But it's crazy to me how people in general don't see it as indoctrination. You know, like when I was a kid, I wasn't taught about sex ed until like 7th grade. And I think that's a lot of people do disagree with sex ed on our side of the aisle.
Yeah.
I semi agree with it, just for the fact because at that age, that's the time when, you really start hitting, like I hit puberty at like 10 years old.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was 12 in 7th grade. That's really the time where you should start learning about those very interesting concepts.
Well, yeah.
to call them interesting concepts. Yeah.
Well, the question is where exactly that should be learned.
Yes, but also you're not going to get an in-depth of an education about the subject at home.
Maybe not. I mean, look.
And I do think it, but don't get me wrong. I'm sorry to interrupt. Don't get me wrong. I do think it is very important for the parents to be the first providers of that information.
Well,
So to decide whether they want their kids to go through it or not, because I had to sign a consent form, or my parents had to sign a consent form.
Yeah, and look, obviously today, anything like sex ed would be completely out of the question, just because obviously we know exactly what it would be now.
Now,
yeah.
I
would argue then, because obviously we had it, and it gets back to the question of religion again. Really gets back to the question of what the public school is. I mean, so are we for the public school in principle? There were a lot of Catholics who would say no.
Yeah,
I'm one of them.
But I mean, you got to understand, though. I mean, I'm not saying you have to understand. I'm sure you do understand that a lot of Catholic schools have adopted.
This is no case for the Catholic schools. Yeah. So I will be the last one to tell you to send your kids to a Catholic school, because our Catholic schools are absolutely horrible right now. Horrible.
Same as public schools, essentially.
Yes, indistinguishable. Actually, what I usually tell people is the only difference between the Catholic school and the public school now is that there's tuition for the Catholic school. So you're getting the same nonsense.
No, it's true.
But again, this is one of these things where we're talking theoretically. Back in the 1800s, we had there was a archbishop, the Archbishop of New York. This guy named Archbishop John Hughes. Dagger John was his nickname. Very tough guy, Irishman. But was instrumental in the flourishing of the Catholic schools in New York, as the public schools were starting to take hold for New York, especially New York City, which was largely Catholic. And he knew
Daggins.
yeah, that's right, Dagger John, baby. And he knew what a flourishing public school meant for his flock, for his people, his Catholic people. It meant what we see now is state education passing along the principles of the state.
And not God. And not morals or
Correct.
values.
And
okay, wow.
So passing on what we see now as the state's sexual ethic.
Yeah.
Completely non-Christian. In fact, it's the reverse of Christian. It's
semi-satanic.
Quite literally satanic. If you want to get into who Satan is,
I like this. I like where you're going with this.
Yeah. So Satan, as we know of, is the devil. For anybody who doesn't believe in the devil or any of this stuff, I would recommend going to listen to a Catholic priest called Father Chad Ripperger. Chad. He's Chad
Giga
Ripperger.
Chad Whittaker.
Giga Chad Ripperger.
Oh, Ripperger?
Yeah, Ripperger.
Ripperger.
Yeah.
Ripperger. Okay.
So he's a traditional Catholic priest, and I do disagree with some of what he says on certain things, but he's an exorcist. So if you want to, for anybody who doesn't, believe in the devil, I would just point that person to his conferences on exorcism, and if they could explain to me how people start speaking random languages and faces contorting and things of this sort, then I'd be happy to try to hear you out. But what the devil does is the devil's mission, which he has ultimately failed at, of course, is to pervert, twist. So the devil can't create. Only God creates. Only God has a creative power, and we could create insofar as we are made in the image and likeness of God. God has given us that faculty to create, write a book or whatever. But the devil can't. The devil can only pervert. He only twists. He only makes ugly that which was beautiful. So what does he do with human sexuality? What kind of influence does the devil have on human sexuality? Well, he takes women and perverts them, turns them into men. Takes men and turns them into women. Nature, which is biology, which is beautiful because God created it, and he takes it. He can't recreate nature. He could only twist it. He could only pervert it. He takes, now again, I am a Catholic. He takes sex and he places it outside of marriage, where it belongs, and he takes marriage and turns it from something what it was, marriage between a man and a woman, to a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. He twists reality. He never creates his own reality, and that is the mission. That is what the devil aims to do, and that's how he tries to ruin your soul. But we know from Genesis, and we know from Scripture, we know the lady, the Mary, will crush the head of the serpent, so nothing to worry about. But that is what the devil does, and so when I say something is satanic, it's quite literally satanic. It's inverted. It's twisted.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it is.
But you don't think that there are any earthly aspects to it? Let's say, like you were talking about, with perverting natural, biological sex in terms of the woman becoming the man and the man becoming the woman. You don't think that there could be any sort of earthly factor outside of, I mean, because
Oh, it's not merely spiritual.
yeah,
Yeah, no, it's lest anybody get the wrong idea. It's not obvious. There's two there's two planes of reality, you might say. So there's Christian understanding of really, in many ways, theistic understanding of personhood is we have a soul, the immaterial self, a lot of the times conflated with our mind. One of the ways that you could, one of a very simple thought experiment about how to prove that in many respects is if you made your brain the size of a house and you walked in it, you wouldn't be able to find a thought.
yeah,
Thoughts, the intellect, seem to be something that can't be measured, like scientifically.
absolutely.
And then you have the body, which
Yes.
is the brain, stuff, right?
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do like what you're saying, and I think this is what you're saying for the thoughts and all that, is that it's part of the soul.
Yes,
it's
yeah,
it's a
much
product
of it.
of the soul.
Yeah, and so the soul and the body are they're distinct, but they're not. They act on each other, so that it's what we'd call an interactionist view of personhood.
Okay.
So the soul and the body interacting. Some, like Rene Descartes, the philosopher Descartes, believed that the soul and the body were basically separate entities completely and didn't have much to do with each other. You call this a ghost in a machine idea. Then there are some people that just think we're physical and that there's no soul or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if you feel that way.
Yeah,
But-
that is unfortunate.
Yeah, but but again, why I'm making that distinction is that on the Christian view, the St. Paul says the soul quickens the body. It's what gives it the life. Quickens means to give life to, gives life to the body. So again, they interact with each other. So the well-being of your body has a ton to do with how well your soul will be.
Absolutely.
How healthy you will be. So physically, there's a profound physical and biological and psychological aspect to these types of conditions like gender dysphoria. So they're not merely spiritual.
Sure.
There are many aspects in which they are. Again, if you want to go on a case-by-case basis, there are probably people who are suffering with it on a spiritual degree more than they're suffering with it on a physical degree,
Sure.
and then vice versa. There are people who have more of a physical problem or only a physical problem and not a spiritual problem. Quite possible.
Yeah.
It's more of a philosophical vision for the kind of influence, satanic influence on society that we're experiencing. So if you, that is to say, if you have a Christian understanding of evil,
Yeah.
this kind of thing is no surprise.
Sure. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I see exactly what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah, lest anybody think that I'm discouraging the use of a doctor to treat something or a psychologist. These people,
Sure.
insofar as they're good, do they ever have their place? They can be fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And something that I was actually talking about on my previous podcast with Nog was trans people who are trans because of societal reasons.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
I read a story, and it was from, I don't remember who, maybe CNN, but they were documenting this teacher from anywhere else but Austin, Texas, about how 20 out of her 33 students, identify as LGBT. That's statistically impossible.
Yeah, and
Considering the data we've had over the past 30 years as society's become more accepting of gay people in general, considering that, for a long time the threshold was like about 2.4%.
right. Yeah, I mean, and what? So what are they going to tell you then? Okay, so we have this many people identifying as LGBT. So does that? So you folks at CNN, does that mean that folks, young students and young people in the 1500s were actually closeted? get a grip. Like we know that's BS.
Yeah.
And we know that this is imposed by evil people.
Yeah.
That could only be by evil people.
Well, and that's a reason why I don't believe in gender. I believe in biological sex.
Well, they're the same. Yeah, they're the same thing. I mean,
I don't think. Well, that's the thing, though, is that
the idea
I don't
of gender.
think exactly. Yeah. I don't think we should be even talking about the idea of gender, because the biological sex is
correct.
Determinate.
To talk about it separately as distinct from it is, it's a complete. It's an old error. You've heard of Gnosticism?
No.
So Gnosticism is this belief that there are two separate, like we talked about the soul and body, that there's these two separate realities. A lot of the times the old Manichaean religion believed that good exists and evil exists, and that they're constantly at war with each other, but they're equal. So it was arbitrary. Good wins out in some things, evil wins out in another thing, but they're equal, so whatever. They're just these separate metaphysical entities. So why this is it's funny because it's an old problem, because it's like, well, you have who you are, the reality. Joe, I'm a man, you're a man.
You're the man.
I try to be. And then I hope your viewers think so, but and then it's almost like that there's these people think that these people who affirm this frankly wicked ideology believe that somehow there could be this you could make reality.
Yeah.
Make your own reality.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's insanity. And as though like in the in the ether, I could just in some metaphysical way, I'm just a woman.
Yeah.
Even though I'm quite obviously and objectively a man. Bible says that there's nothing new under the sun, and it's so odd that you just see these old problems. I mean, back to the Roman Empire, this was transgenderism was considered one of the markers of a society that's nearing its collapse.
Sexual deviancy, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
degeneracy. Yeah. Yeah, quite simply, if you're not producing that many people, good luck surviving.
Yeah.
And we're not,
Yeah, no, in general, no.
Yeah, I mean, the Muslims, they're outproducing us, Westerners, and...
Well, you know what? But, and this is another thing, like that's crazy to me about modern day society is that you see how happy Muslim families are.
In many respects.
And you look at the modern day American Christian family that doesn't really respect, the values that were instilled in the Bible, and
right.
They're all about just getting by and this and that. Comparatively speaking, we're probably way unhappier.
It seems to be. I mean, it seems to be that we're struggling with an unhappiness and depression problem more than Muslim cultures.
Absolutely.
And other religious cultures.
Yet we're the most advanced, the most successful societies on the planet.
Yeah.
In history.
And it
most comfortable.
And you wonder, right? And you wonder then, what are we doing as people? What our end is for? Everything has an end. Teleology. Telos is the end of something. The end of the chair is to sit in it. The end of marriage is to beget children and things like that. And what is our purpose? Does life have meaning? Your purpose. This was all quite simple for a long time, for years.
Yeah.
In the catechism, if you ask many young Catholics today who believe the faith, you ask them, well, why are you here? To know, love, and serve God, and to enjoy Him in this life and be with Him in the next. Simple stuff, not complicated.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What that means is you're not a number. You're not a cog in a machine. You're not here to produce wealth for some CEO. You're not here to, be just some grunt worker for the state or whomever. No, you have purpose. And if you're viewing your life as as a tool, of course you're going to be miserable. And I think that's where, and if you want to get back to you could get back to in some respects, the question of capitalism. I think we were so inundated with this first going to college, which was probably pushed on you by the public school, like it was pushed on me.
Oh yeah.
And I did go. I got a bachelor's degree. I'm happy I did because I got a lot of good out of it myself. But I actually, oftentimes you hear tropes about people who go off to college and become atheists. The opposite happened to me. But you're kind of treated as a economic statistic in a free market society. Your identity is conflated often with what you do and with your job and things, and that seems to be tried to be where people try to derive their meaning from. And all of that, of course, comes to an end with age. And of course, at work you could fail or something, all of this. And if you don't have the reassurance of this first principle, this first truth, that you are made in God's image and that that is your end, that is your goal, then then of course if you forget that and you are just numeric and that it's only roses on your grave after you die, of course you're going to be miserable. Why wouldn't you be?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
So it's all quite logical in the end,
Yeah. And it is disappointing the way that you have to outline the fact that you do become just a number at a certain point. And that's probably another reason as to why this society is so depressed and so anxious, is because, besides the fact of lacking in God and lacking in, just this meaning in general.
Yes.
Is just the fact that when you're just a number, there's nothing bigger than that.
Right.
You're just a statistic and you'll never be anything besides that.
Right. And that is in many respects what they want you to believe. It's
Absolutely.
False. It's false. I mean, anybody who wants to know if God is real, I would point them to the work of there's this philosopher. He's a Protestant. I'm a Catholic. But he does a lot of good work on proofs for the existence of God. And so does St. Thomas Aquinas, who has his 5 proofs, 5 ways that we know God exists. So they're logical arguments to show that faith is not something that is believing what you know ain't so. It's not that.
Yeah.
It's one of the popes, Pope John Paul II, had whom I'm not fond of in many reasons, but he called faith and reason two wings of the same bird. So faith and reason cooperate with each other. Faith and science cooperate with each other. Aristotle, had the law of non-contradiction. A cannot be not A. Things that something cannot be and not be. Yes, and I think if you look up the works of those men and their proofs for God's existence, we could have St. Thomas could say that we can know God exists. We can know God exists and that Christ is his son, that we could know this by reason. There are mysteries like the Trinity that we can't exactly. They're not against reason. They're just they're not counterintelligent. They're not contradictory in nature. They're just mysteries, as it were.
Sure.
But yeah, we could certainly know God exists. I would point you to their work. They're better philosophers than I am. I can tell you that. But yeah, I mean, all of this I could just assure you is eminently reasonable and eminently practical, because there's one of the biggest criticisms of atheism in a godless society is that, and we're seeing it, is that it's unlivable.
Yeah.
It creates misery.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I agree 100%.
Yeah. Good.
No, but I mean, it's true
you.
because, when your morals are no longer moral,
Yeah.
and it's funny because I was actually just reading something today. Do you know the Instagram page Garbage Human?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So he posts like just like funny like degenerate shit like
Yeah.
just and there's this philosophy now, and it's kind of prevalent in modern day conservatives as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, let's be honest, you're gonna see it mostly in like liberals,
Mm-hmm.
and it's this matter of creating your own morality, and just if I'm a good person, then what does it matter? All right, well, who are you to define what a good person is? If you're a good person in your head, but you go out slaying people and eating their innards, that's who's saying that's moral besides you?
Right. That's right. And that is the moral argument for the existence of God. It goes something like, there are no objective moral values and duties if God does not exist. There are objective moral values and duties. Therefore, conclusion, God exists. Premise 1, premise 2, conclusion. That's how reasoning goes.
Sure.
So if you've taken any philosophy courses, that's a cogent argument. It works.
Yeah.
So you have to deny one of those premises in order for the conclusion to be false.
Yes.
So what are you going to deny? You're going to deny that there's objective moral values and duties? Good luck with that. Because then you're just, that's great. Then, but get ready for whatever moral nihilism is, because it's a horror show.
Yeah.
So you could say, "Oh, I don't believe in morality." Do you want to live in a society where nobody believes in morality? Because you're not going to like it.
Yeah. And it's so funny because it's like, what happens when someone's good morals happen to be something that you disagree with, and then they invade your space in whatever way? Yeah, exactly. Maybe they murder your family member. Maybe they go out and, God forbid, rape you.
Yeah, on an atheistic worldview, they have more power than you, and might makes right. They could do it.
It's just wild too, and you know what? Something that I just thought about is the fact that human beings thrive with guidelines.
Yes.
And so, why is it though that the things that make us feel good, and those happen to be things that God says are morally correct? Such as having a family and being a good person,
procreating.
Yeah, that's one of them, but that's one of the biggest to me, because right now one of the biggest problems we have in our society is sexual degeneracy. But we'll get to that in a minute. But people flourish with guidelines, and when you take those guidelines away, you get what you're seeing now, which is just mass hysteria. Yeah, essentially.
Yeah, it's like wow, things were made a certain way, and it works when we act a certain way. Like, what a surprise! You know what I mean? Like
and that's another argument for why God exists too.
Yes,
because
it is.
It's like who instilled those morals in us? Why do we feel good when we get a hug, and why do we feel bad when someone hurts our family member or hurts our friend?
Yeah, again, it's back to morality. And I think it was John Henry Cardinal Newman, one of the great thinkers in church history, articulated it that there's never been a society in human history that, look, there's been non-Christian societies, there's been pagan societies, whatever, but there's never been a society in human history where not following your conscience is considered the right thing. Every society, Christian, whomever, considers following your conscience, even a deformed conscience, but conscience, considers it the right thing to do. Now, is that a guideline, or is that an accident of history? Is the fact that undergirds all of humanity, all of human history, an accident? I sort of doubt it.
Yeah, no.
So, well, it's actually funny. There's I don't know if you've ever heard of Christopher Hitchens.
Yes.
But yeah.
Very famous atheist.
Oh, yeah, and very likable in a lot of ways. But I remember watching him debate William Lane Craig and on whether or not God exists. He gets his clock clean, the poor guy. But I would recommend go watch that debate if you can. It's fun. But he says, well, it's funny because he thinks he's like owning like the Christian guy by like being like, oh, but humans are pattern-seeking creatures. Huh. It's like, yeah,
Why?
dude, because there's patterns.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? Like, it's like, it's not, it's like, that's thoroughly unsurprising. It's just like, it's like, well, I got him because like you're looking for patterns and you're wired that way, you idiot. But it's just like,
Why were you wired that way?
I'm looking for patterns because there's patterns, you moron. They're everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why the hell do you think geometry works? It's another one of these great arguments is that when you talk about math, things are mathematical formulae and stuff like that. It works. It's not. We haven't imposed it on reality. It's something we discovered, and it's just like, is all this there just by mistake, or it's like, are we actually looking for patterns because there is a pattern?
Yeah.
We're not wired to look for patterns, only for there to be no patterns. Men are argued to look for a wife because there's women.
Yes.
And you're hungry because there's food. We want patterns because there are patterns. We desire meaning because there's meaning. I mean, that would be a kind of cruel trick that the universe played on us.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden that the universe, if all of a sudden we come of age and we realize that, I mean, we come out of the womb screaming and crying, and we demand right from the start attention and care and love, and only for that to be wiped out after 80 years or 90 years of existence.
Yeah.
This innate desire to be cared for, to be loved, to have meaning. It would be an odd thing that the desire for friendship and the desire for love and to have a wife and to eat and all that all these other innate desires that we experience as people, for those to be fulfilled, and yet the perhaps the most important of them, this desire for meaning, this desire for good, that it has no object, that it ultimately will never be fulfilled, and haha, it's just this horrible joke. Life is this cosmic car crash. I sort of doubt it.
Yeah, I know.
You know, I mean, it doesn't seem to go along with the rest of reality, if you ask me.
No way.
So I think we could have hope.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of reason to have hope.
Absolutely. You know, listen, so many societies have fallen.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not what we want, because we've had probably the greatest run in history of innovation, of freedom, of capital gain. But, you know, every single thing has its end, as you said.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And if it's time to go, it's time to go.
Yeah, and look, for people have forgotten tremendous scientific, technological developments and discovery.
Things that will never leave us.
Yeah. And they're genuinely good. But if man forgets who gave him the capacity and the gift to create in that way, God will remind you that you forgot.
No, it's true. And he'll remind you in a very...
Yeah, and we will...
very undesirable way.
Yes. People often say, well, that was the Old Testament God. They're the same God, buddy. And, you know, so it could get ugly. And it already is. I mean, we didn't even talk about Russia and Ukraine, but...
Well, I mean, look, it's like... think of all the things plaguing our society now, and think about when... Moses was set to free the Jews from Egypt, and how the Pharaoh was hard-hearted, and how God released frogs, many frogs among the land, and when the Pharaoh hardened his heart again, gnats, and then when the Pharaoh hardened his heart again, flies, and then it just takes shape in different ways.
Yes, exactly. And again, there's nothing new, and sometimes we just need a bit of a wake-up call. And I didn't mention Russia and Ukraine, and war is usually understood as a punishment for sin. Yeah, and absolutely. And boy, are we dealing with it. You know, discord and violence, and you know,
it's funny because my grandmother, you know, she was born in 1940, so she saw World War II.
Yeah, this Civil War of the West, as it's Pat Buchanan called
essentially.
It. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. But she was talking about how, you know, before the war started, they said that God, you know, like she was from Portugal, so Fatima is obviously pretty big over there.
Yeah, we just did a show on Fatima.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But she was talking about how before the war, the Blessed Mother appeared and was talking about how
Sure did,
the sky would turn blood red if things didn't. I can't remember what it was. It was like the night before the war really started. Like the sky would turn blood red.
So,
and
yeah, the all important message of Fatima. Our Lady appeared in a very important year, 1917. That was the same year of the Lenin and the Bolsheviks started their revolution, and Our Lady appeared. And I would urge anybody who's listening to this to do a search. The YouTube channel called the Fatima Center covers a lot of this, but if you secular and atheist source newspapers at the time covered what was the miracle of the sun, and Our Lady spoke to 3 shepherd children and said, if Russia is not consecrated to my Immaculate Heart, Russia will spread its errors, which in many respects I think we could see it has.
Yeah.
And there will be a chastisement upon the world. Now, Pope Francis actually, for all his manifold flaws, there are many.
Consecrated Russia.
Well, some people quibble over the wording, whether or not it was done properly with all the bishops. It was done, I guess, a week ago. If you look on the show that I often go on, there's a panel with me and 3 other folks on rules for retrogrades. I did it with a guy named Dr. Ed Mazza, historian Charles Coulombe, and my very, very good friend Timothy Gordon. I thought it was helpful. I happen to believe that there's a good chance the consecration was done right, and I'm hoping from there that we might start to see some a bit of
progress,
a turn for in the right direction, because the church, despite it having many flawed members, is still. The Holy Spirit and the Holy Ghost still operates in the church and still can guide these flawed men to do the right thing. And I hope it fulfilled Our Lady's message. And and to verify this Our Lady's claim, she performed what was called the miracle of the sun, and it's quite a hell of a tale about the sun appearing to come to earth and starting to dance and things of this sort. And Freemasons and atheist newspapers were it was raining that day. Reporters wrote that they saw it, and they're not Catholic by any of the enemies of the church. They saw the same thing happen, and again, it was raining, and these people, right after the fact, their clothes were dry after having been soaking wet. So I would really recommend that people go source that miracle and take a look at it and see how, especially with the prevalence of Russia and Ukraine too, which is historically a part of Russia, and see how important the message of the Blessed Virgin Mary is for our time there. Very important.
Yeah.
Grandmother is right on, as they usually are, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no. I forget what it was, though, that she was talking about, because she said that, I think it was like before the war started, maybe like the day before the war, she was like, the message of the Blessed Mother was that if you don't change your ways, that a great terror will befall the earth and the sky will turn blood red.
There will be a woman clothed in the sun, I think. So, well, no, that's in the apocalypse, but so she does speak. So I forget about the red sky, but she does certainly speak of a chastisement of sorts, and God is. I mean, we've seen it before.
The great smiter.
Yeah, he certainly is, and Noah,
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, that's right. We do know what they were up to.
Yeah. What time do you have your training session, by the way?
I have my session quite shortly, but
what time?
6-ish, 6 now.
Right.
But I don't see my guy here yet. But soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's it.
But yeah. I mean, I guess if you want to cut it there, we can cut it there. If there's anything else you want to talk about,
I would just reiterate. There's always reason for hope. There's never any reason to black pill. No reason to despair.
Absolutely.
Read the great authors. Read the classics and exercise and come train and study. And life is a truly beautiful and profound thing, and nothing is meaningless. Everything is profoundly meaningful.
Damn right.
And I guess that's I'd be happy to end on there. Yeah.
I would be happy to end there as well.
Cool.
Joe Bocca, thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you for
on.
having me, John. It was a lot of fun.
Listen, it was my pleasure,
Yeah.
and we're definitely going to have you back
Yeah,
on.
thank you, buddy.
Awesome podcast, man. That was fun. That was great.